Hi everyone, Sat here. So first of all, thanks so much for the comments. I appreciate that. The likes, the new subscribers. Or hey, how you doing? We totally smashed the challenge of having 3 comments, 3 likes, and yeah, we got like 7 likes and 4 comments and some new subscribers. And that was only in like a day or something, which was great. So let's keep this up. Let's see. Let's do the next challenge. Let's aim even higher. Let's go for 10 comments. 10 likes and 10 new subscribers, or that's the current amount that we've got now. And let's see how big we can make this channel together. It'd be kind of cool to see what we can do. So okay, in this tutorial, I'm going to fix that little juttery issue that we had when we're moving the object around for placement. And we're going to add this new cool effect where it looks like the game object is kind of flying out of the screen before it gets placed, and that kind of, it's just a nice cool effect that we can reuse going forwards. And then we can look at multiple objects in the next tutorial as well. Alright, let's get started. So on our last tutorial we had some jittery movement, some juttering with the cube on the phone, right? And that's because the hip position is being changed every time we move the phone, and it's a little bit slower to update on our phones than it is on our computer. It's not as smooth. So we want to add some lerping to this. So, oh, by the way, if you can hear some background noises, there's some work, isn't there, where I live, so try to ignore it though. Alright, so let's grab our game object to place, and let's change this transform dot position as normal. But instead of it being to the hit point, what we're going to do now is we're gonna lerp it. So lerping doesn't move the game object immediately. What it does is says we want to move it to a position. So we want to move it from a position, which is going to be the position that it's at, and we want to move it to a new position, which is going to be our hit point. In fact, what I'll do is I'll name this new position. I think that's a better name, right? So I'm going to move it to this new position, and then we want to do this within a certain time frame and speed, right? So we're going to do it time.delta, and then we want a speed that we want to move it at. Now the speed we're gonna work out what that's gonna be. I think I did that before, although I can't remember what number it was, so we'll have to kind of play around with that number. For now, what I'll do is I'll just do a public variable, and I'll do a public float, and I'll do speed equals 1f. Right, so let's see what the lerping is with a speed of 1f. So let's play that. And we might not notice too much, but you can see actually now if I move down, it doesn't move exactly there. It takes time. It's taking time to move to the position, and this is what the lerping is. It's taking like 1 second basically, I think, roughly, to get to the exact location. And that's kind of nice actually, because that means that it's not going to be jittery, or it's going to be nice and smooth, and it kind of looks like it's not stuck to the camera now. The object looks like a separate thing, almost moving and flowing with the phone. Look at that, it's really nice. If I move across, it's moving nicely to where it wants to be. It even goes off of the screen, which is kind of cool. So that's a nice little feature that I think we've got in our app. Let's just make this cube, this floor, a little bit smaller. Let's change it to 5 by 5. And I just want to see what happens when we go off of the surface. I believe it stops moving, maybe, the cube. So if I look down, the cube's there. Yeah, so it kind of just stops moving. Let's move this the floor even closer to the camera. Let's do that, and then let's see what happens when I move the camera up off of the cube. It just stops moving, right? Which kind of makes sense. It's the code is written so that it's only moving it when it's on a surface. I'd like to do, we haven't placed the cube yet. We're just doing it, moving it around. But I want to do something where when we first start our app, if I look on the floor like that, and I move this floor back as well to here, I want to do it so that the cube doesn't just appear out of nowhere. Can you see it kind of just, it floated in, but it floated in from kind of up there, which I don't really know why it floated from there. Oh, I do know actually. That was the where it floated from is the origin. So every time we start the app, no matter where we look from, the cube is going to kind of float in. If I change this camera now, which is a bit of a problem actually that we've got here. If I change the camera and I point it over here and I play the app, the origin, the starting point of the phone of the cube is here, so you can see it moved in over there, and that's kind of a nice effect. But imagine if the camera, imagine if someone starts the phone in one room, walks out of the room, walks down the corridor, and then starts tracking the floor. That means the cube is going to take, you know, maybe 5, 6, 7 seconds to move from where they first started the app, which is always the origin, all the way to where they're pointing, and they might think that it's not working. So we want to change this now. We want to adapt our code slightly, and we want to fix this. We don't want the starting point to be the origin. We want it to be, now we're going to try and make it, which is a little bit more tricky. We want to try and make it the camera, right? And what this means is, actually, it should look pretty cool. It should look like the cube is coming out of the camera every time we put the app on and point it on the surface for the first time. It'll look like it's shooting out of the camera, hitting the floor, and no matter where we move the camera as well, we'll always kind of get that effect. And it's quite nice. It means that we can use this for all our future kind of apps as well. So I quite like that. I think it's a good starting. It's a good little piece of code, right? So what do we want to do, right? We want to make this placed cube. We don't want it to be 0, 0, 0. We want it to be inside our camera now, right? So this is going to get a little bit tricky, and then we want to put it as 0, 0, 0, 0, and we want to change the rotation of it as well. Now that means that wherever we move our camera, the cube will go with it. Man, there could be some issues now with the code, right? Because the code is changing the position of the cube. Oh no, well that kind of looks cool actually. There you go. It worked better than I thought, right? So let's move the camera now and see how this looks. You see that now when I try to move the camera, it's moving the camera and the cube. So the cube is now isn't separate to the camera. It's inside of it. We don't want that, right? So we want to do a bit more. We want to separate, as soon as we find a surface, we want to separate the cube from the camera again. So we have to work on some code that does that. So on our update method, where we have our cube and finding it, what we want to do is, well, maybe not even on our update, because our update's just finding the point it gets hit. So we want to do it in our game code. What we want to say is, we can remove this code now. I can just adapt it slightly to do the next part. We want to do the transform, and the parent of the cube, which is the game object that we're placing, is no longer the camera. The parent is now going to be null, which should mean as soon as that happens, the object is placed on the floor, right? Now that's good, but I might cause some issues as well, but let's have a look at what that looks like. Let's play it and see how that looks. In fact, what I'll do is I'll move the camera up slightly. No, let's start it off like this. Oh, there you go. Great. So it's shot straight out of the camera, and you can see that the camera. If you look at the hierarchy, we can see that the cube is placed there. We want to change the rotation of the cube because it's still holding the same rotation that it had when it was inside the camera. So let's move the camera, and we've got this nice smooth movement still as well. And if I look up off of the surface, it still holds it, which is good. I want to try and change that. So what I want to do is, if I move off the camera and I look over here, right into the sky, I'd actually prefer it if it went back into the camera. So we'll have to change some of this some more of this code, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to also not just change the position, we're going to change the rotation as well, so that the rotation is reset, because at the moment it's still holding the same rotation that the camera had, which is the last parent that was in. So let's change the rotation to be quaternion.identity. That's good. And then what we want to do is we want to have something else in our update method, right? What we want in our update method is to know when it's hitting a surface and when it's not hitting a surface. So at the moment, this is just like finding the place where we want to place the cube, right? So, you know, this is great. This looks really lovely. And then when we take it off of a surface, we don't want it to hold the last position. We want it to go back into the camera, right? So we need to do something where when it hasn't hit the surface, it puts it back inside, right? And that's a bit tricky in some ways, but what we can do is we can say that when we can add a bool, right, to this start of this code, and we can say public bool is placed, and this might come in handy, equals false, right? This might come in handy, this bool, later on as well, if we ever want to check whether the object has been placed or not. And when we have the game code and we've hit a surface, we know that is placed is true, right? Now we know is placed is true when this game code is happening. So what we can do in this update method is at the end of the update method we can have if is placed is equal to false, right? We want to then change the game objects to place.transform.parent back to the camera now, right? Because now we want to force it back into the camera, and obviously because it's inside the camera, if we now change the transform dot position, but it's going to be the local position now because it's local to the parent. We can change that to local position to vector 3.0, which basically just means 0, 0 again, which is where it was at the start. So the local position is 0, 0, 0. That's not the global position. The global position would have been 0, 0, 0 in the global world, which is the starting origin, which is around here. We don't want it to be, which is why we use local instead of just dot position, because it's local to the parent. And that's also why we set the parent first and then set the local parent. Alright, so a little bit tricky to get your head around, but hopefully you've managed to get that. And if we now hit play, we should have a kind of a nice effect here. Okay, that's fine. And then if we shift up off of the ground, so it hasn't actually taken it off. And the reason why is because is placed equals true, but at no point do we set is placed equals false again. So what I want to do is, this code only runs if is placed equals false. So we want to do is placed equals false here, because we place it here and then we're just going to assume that it's not placed here. And then when the update runs again, it will check, has it been placed, has it hit array, and if it has, it will put is placed as true, and then it will skip all this, and then it will set is placed to false and come back again. Now that should actually work. So we know it works for when it's placing it now. It should work for when we're setting is placed as false now. So let's have a look. Okay, so let's placed it. Let's see what happens in this screen when I shift the camera up off of the ground. Where does the red cube go? Bang. So you saw that the cube is now inside the camera, right? And if I move my camera around back onto, look at that, it shoots straight out of the camera. I've lost the tracking now, which is great, which is what I want. Now if I go back onto tracking, it shoots out of the camera. Now we've got a really nice effect here that we can use for placing game objects. Now the speed of that, I don't know whether that's fast enough or not. That's something we can work out, or we can check on device. So let's have a look at how that looks on device. Actually, let's do that now. Let's build this to device. And the good thing is, for our code, is that since we've done this to work, we've tested it on the screen. You know, all this stuff that we've done now. At no point did I have to stop the tutorial and test it out on the device. I'm just testing it on the device at the end of all the code. And the reason why, imagine having to do all this code and test it at the end. It would have been a pain, right? You know, even having to connect your phone and just using something like instant preview, it's still a bit annoying, right? So this has really saved us a lot of time. We still have to test on the device, but we can do that at the end once we know all our code works. And the good thing is we haven't changed any of the device specific code, which was this, right? This is the only device specific code. We don't really want to change any of this. We want to avoid changing this. What we changed, the only thing we changed was outside of this code in the update loop and inside of the game code, which affects both the device and the phone, right? So I'm going to unplay this. Our ARCore goes off. The test floor, that will vanish when we put it on device because we've got that in here. So let's build this now. I'm quite pleased with that, but let's see how this looks on the phone. Okay, so we've got this working now. You can see it shoot out of the screen. If I move off of the screen, we've lost the tracking, which is what we want now. It should shoot out of the camera. There we go, as soon as it found tracking. So this is working really nicely. The only issue that we have now is that it's a little bit slow. We've got rid of the juttering, which is actually brilliant. Look, I mean, look how I can move this. The cube isn't juttering around. It's really smooth. It's actually a little bit too slow though, so we want to increase the speed. Also, it looks like the cube's at a slight angle, which is a bit odd because I did set the rotation to 0. So let's have a look at trying to fix that. Okay, so let's change the speed from 1 to 5 and see what that looks like. Okay, so we've got it. I've got it working now. If I go up, it's much faster. If I do this, it shoots onto the ground, and it's a lot smoother than it was before, and it's a lot faster as well. The only thing is we've still got this rotation issue. In fact, if I zoom in, you can see it's kind of sitting inside the ground, which is really strange. So let's see if we can fix that. Okay, so it's really strange how we were getting that issue, right? So I'm going to try and do one other thing. I'm going to change this rotation here. Right, I'm going to take this rotation out from there, and I'm going to put it I'm going to put it here at the end of the update. So the last thing that happens is the rotation of the game object is set to this identity, right? A little bit of a tough one, right? Well, actually, what I'll do is I'll actually get this and I'll put it at the end of our code here, and I'll also put it here. The difference is, the reason I'm putting it inside the different things is because it works perfectly in the editor, so this should still work on the editor. Instead of it doing it at the end here, it's doing it here. And also, so we can do something for different on the device, because it looks a little bit odd. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to do the game object of rotate is equal to the hit pose dot rotation, and I think this means it will be the same rotation as the floor that it's hit. And by doing that, it means that it will, you know, if maybe we scan a different type of surface like a wall or the ceiling, it will be the same. It will look like it's sitting on the ceiling. I believe that should fix the issue, and we can change the update for the in the editor to identity quaternion.identity. So that should. It's a different way of looking at it, a different way of doing it, but let's have a look at how that looks on the device now. Let's also just check what it looks like on the. Well, actually, you know what? I think that was a little too far, so I'm gonna drop that to 3, right? And I'm gonna try it now and see what it looks like in the editor. That's pretty nice. Shoots out. It's a kind of a nicer speed, and it's still, you know, it's still working. The angle, the rotation of it looks fine. So let's build this to the device and let's see if this solves that rotation issue that we just had. All right, let's scan the floor, and it should shoot out perfect. It shot straight out of the camera onto the floor as exactly what we'd want. Tracking's a bit funky, but that's more of an ARCore issue. If I go off of the screen, off of the tracking and back on, and it's nice and smooth, and best of all, the rotation's fixed. That bug was getting on my nerves a little bit, so that's a good thing as well. So there we go. We've managed to solve this problem, and we've got this nice kind of effect as well, which is lovely. When we're placing loads of different kind of items, which we'll be doing in the next tutorial, we want to do multiple objects. So that's the end of the tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. That rotation bug was really getting on my nerves. I have no idea why that didn't work in the first place, but we got there in the end. Let's see if we can hit the new challenge of, you know, getting 10 likes, 10 comments, and 10 new subscribers. So if you haven't already done so, make sure you leave a comment, make sure you hit like, and make sure you are subscribed, and then I will release a video once we hit 10. I think we can do it. I think we can grow this channel together. I think we can grow as developers as well, as along with the market of augmented reality. So I'm looking forward to seeing where things go, and I will see you in the next tutorial.